Welcome. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands that we're all meeting on. We've got people as far away as New Zealand joining us today. So welcome to our cousins across the ditch and also to those of you that are joining us throughout Australia. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of those lands. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and are really thrilled with the role that our program plays in continuing to build leadership in all Australian people, including our First Nations people. And we, of course, extend this respect to anybody on the call today who is one of our First Nations people. Welcome and thank you for joining us. So today we are covering off on the hot topic of successful remote team leadership. Now, regardless of where you are in the world right now, you've been thrust into this whole remote working situation. Perhaps it's not something that was familiar to you. Perhaps you've also now got a team of people that are reporting to you that are really navigating this difficult time that we all face. In addition to that, we're all having to really cope and struggle with our co-workers slash housemates slash pets slash children slash partners as we really move that through. So that's why we decided to bring this together today for you. Those of you that don't know me, my name's Suzy Miller. I've been working in the leadership development space now for 10 years. Prior to that, I was 10 years with a senior manager at NAB Bank. And during that time, I was leading remote sites of up to 250 people and 26 different locations. So this whole remote working and remote team leadership is not something that was unfamiliar to me even, 20 years ago. But the landscape has changed quite significantly in that we do also have people working from home. My co-host Fiona Brown also works with us in the field of leadership development. And thanks for joining me today, Fee.
No worries, Suzy, thanks.
Excellent. So let's jump into it and have a look at what we want to achieve from today. So we would love it if you could walk away today really with a sense of how to stay connected during this time of disconnect, building the trust that's required. And trust is a really critical thing that during times like this, we can forget about some of those basics. And it's about letting your people do what they need to do and kind of getting out of the way sometimes. Learning how to engage, so having your team engage and solve their own problems as opposed to them being dependent on you for all of those little things that come up. And as well as keeping them motivated and on the right task. So often they're busy, but are they working on the right things that are important for you? So when we look at remote working, and this whole situation that we've been thrust into, some of us have been moved into it differently to others. So some are at different stages of this, wherever you are in the world. But the challenges with working from home, which I'm sure you've all navigated, is that lack of face-to-face supervision, that lack of being able to just walk over and tap someone on the shoulder or, have a meeting with them face-to-face in the flesh. The lack of access to information. So of course, as this pandemic has rapidly taken over the way that we do things, there's been conflicting information coming out. We face social isolation. So with so much of what we do as humans being normally in-person connection, when we retreat from that and are in our own spaces, that social isolation can be real. As well as the distractions of home, and I alluded to this before with our co-workers. So whether it's, having to homeschool, whether it's navigating how to work with a dog jumping on your lap or a cat walking in front of the screen as you're on a Zoom call, or perhaps a partner that's just got out of the shower, whatever it is for you, those distractions are real. And of course, there are already silos, generally speaking, in most workplaces. And so this has really just exaggerated those silos. When we look at some remote leadership pitfalls, and I'm sure you've all experienced them, hopefully haven't done too many of them, but I think from time to time, we do tend to take our stresses out on those around us, and sometimes that's those that we're not physically seeing. And the challenge with that is that when you're having either screen communication or phone communication, there's so much of it is really hanging on the words and the tone of how you communicate. So that can be a really big challenge. the lack of control. I'm sure some of our control freaks on the call today have really struggled with this whole piece of how do I make sure they're still doing the right stuff? And that's, of course, why you're all here today. So that constant sort of checking in and perhaps micromanagement might be something that you've fallen into the habit of doing. And unfortunately, that does not set people up for success, and it doesn't foster innovation. The other thing that we've seen happen is, forcing people to clock on and off from 9 till 5. In fact, some of us work better outside of those hours. So this is one of the benefits I see of remote working, but it can also, from a leadership perspective, if you're being too rigid, it really can stifle those that you're working with. Understanding, of course, there's meetings and things that do need to happen during business hours, but being flexible around that. And the awkward team social catch-ups. I'm not sure about you, but I've seen a few. Small business drink sessions that turn into an argument between partners, where everyone sort of sits there going, this is not fun. This is incredibly awkward. So forcing those kinds of catch-ups has really, I think, been one of the things that I've seen not work so well. So when we talk about the tips for success, now this comes from having worked for the past 10 years, as I said, with senior executives worldwide, and identifying what's the stuff that works for those that are leading remotely, as well as what we've seen in more recent times. So I've been supporting people through that, senior leaders through one-on-one and in programs. And these are some of the things that I've seen that really work if you get them right. So our top 6 tips for success. First one being trust. The second one being communicate. And that's not a typo. We want you to be, regularly communicating, and we'll go into these in a bit more detail. Having you focus too much on activities as opposed to outcomes. So a tip for success is to really be outcome focused, not so much about the nitty-gritty of how we get there. Increasing recognition. Now this sounds like a bit of a, well, duh, we do that. And how do you do that in a difficult time where the finances aren't perhaps there to recognize people? As well as that, encouraging innovation. And that's the things that can be stifled when we micromanage. And of course, the final one, which probably should be number 1, is about how you lead yourself. So let's jump in and have a look at those individually. So if we look at trust, now trust is about honesty, consistency, following through. So doing what you say you're going to do. It's about fairness. It's about integrity. It's about allowing that sort of balance and having that balance yourself in terms of that work-life balance. And the supporting of diversity. So rather than checking in, we suggest to check up, which is quite a different mindset to look at that through. And people, when you, even in the language, when we say we're checking up on, I just thought I'd check up on you and see how you're going. It's quite different to, I'm just checking in to see how you're doing. It has a really different connotation to them. And creating psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is well researched and is really heavily linked to trust. So creating a team of people that and they know that they can rely on you. If they have made a mistake, they can contact you and have that conversation without there being severe repercussions or perhaps overreactions. It's about creating a space where people feel that they can put forward suggestions or ideas. Now, these might feel uncomfortable for you at the beginning, but actually when you create that sort of real climate of seeking feedback and growth and all the rest of it, and really create that growth mindset within your team, that psychological safety is strong and the outcomes are also strong that's linked to it. So there's 2 types of trust to foster in a team. So that effective trust, which is really all based on that emotional bond and interpersonal relatedness. And if you think about the times that we faced, we've lacked some of that interpersonal bond because we're doing it through screens or over the phone. So it's really important for us to continue that. You know, that sort of water cooler chat that would not normally happen, where you can share bits about you, it's not happening in the online or the remote environment. So it's critical that you create the space to be able to tap into those emotional bonds and interpersonal relatedness. One of the side effects that the US is seeing in particular around COVID and this remote working situation is actually when workplaces go back, and for some of us that's looking like that may happen shortly, when they go back to the workplace, they're seeing high rates of resignation. So there's the great resignation situation that's happening, particularly in the US, where people are actually no longer feeling connected to their leader, they're no longer feeling connected to the business, and they're no longer feeling like that what they do is actually adding to their purpose. So one of the things that we can do as leaders is to build those emotional bonds with people and those interpersonal skills. It's really critical. Otherwise, we're going to see a massive drop off in talent, and I think that's a big risk. And the other one is that cognitive trust, which is all about reliability and competence. Like I said before, that doing what you say you're going to do. So making sure that you are delivering all of this makes you a trustworthy leader. So communicate, I said before, communicate, communicate, communicate. So, you know, this is one of the things that often we feel like, you know what, I won't reach out, I'll just stay out of the way. Or we feel like this communication needs to be, or either the other side, where it's actually too great, where we've got people smothering people with communication. Now, communicate, communicate, communicate does not mean smother people and not give them a space to do their work. But it is about having regular scheduled team calls and individual one-on-one calls. It's one of the things that we tend to drop in these times, particularly that one-on-one, because we feel like, oh, I just want to leave them alone. But actually creating the space for people where they can share their stuff, they can share how they're feeling, they can share their frustrations, they can give you feedback is really important. Being responsive, so being quick in terms of getting information out, and we've seen people do that really well through, you know, that are strong in change management. But, you know, others, it's sort of been lagging, and team members are saying, come on, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? So that responsiveness to get messages out is critical. So the reporting side of communicating, so there is the element of, you know, we do need to understand where you're at. So making sure that we've got some good systems in place so that our conversations with people aren't dominated collecting data, but we've got those reporting streams coming through. Obviously communicating the work schedule. So what are the priorities right now? That socialization. So make sure that there's a light-hearted factor to the communication that you're having with your team, where appropriate, of course. So we say to communicate often, succinctly, transparently, and with compassion and empathy. So this whole be kind mindset for leaders is just so critical right now. Because you just don't know what other people are doing, are working through. And that empathy piece is really critical. Understanding what it's like to walk in the shoes of somebody else is one of the things at the moment that will put you in good stead. Now, I said before, focusing on outcomes, not activity. What does that mean? So it's having clearly defined goals, reinforcing the organization's values, and linking the individual's contribution to something bigger. Now, I mentioned this when I talked about the great resignation wave that the US is seeing. If people feel like that what they're doing really isn't adding value to an organization, then they're more likely to exit. So really linking those to something bigger. Now, the something bigger might be linking it to the mission for your organization, linking it to the outcomes, linking it to seeing what it is that what you do contributes to the overall business. So really breaking that down is important. Treating your employees as key stakeholders. So this is a different mindset. We all have stakeholders that we manage, but often in these times we forget that our employees are actually those stakeholders. So if we look at them through the lens of what we would a client, as an example, we're going to have strengthened relationships. And of course, continuing to role model the right behaviors. So you are being watched right now, making sure that in terms of the outcomes that you need to achieve, that you are demonstrating the same thing. You're walking the talk. Linking the performance to the bigger picture, as I said. So when people are achieving outcomes, really celebrating the fact that that's helped to contribute to the greater good of the organisation. And also, of course, focusing on what employees should be accomplishing. So making sure that they are working on the right tasks that is linked to what your organisation needs right now is critical. Now, increasing recognition, I said this before, this is a tricky one because some people go, yeah, we've had a pretty big financial downturn in our organisation. How can I go increasing recognition, Suzy? You know, there's not this magical pot of dollars. There's so much that you can do to recognise your people that does not involve financial implications for the organisation. So I like a Feedback Friday. So Feedback Friday is something that I like to do where I reach out to people on a Friday and give them positive feedback. It does two things. It sends them off on their weekend on a high. And for me, it feels really good to do. So it really helps to improve that motivation and also set people up for not only a restful weekend, but to hit the ground running when they return the following week. So there's things that you can do, even just providing feedback or telling people what you've appreciated about their contribution for that week can really make a difference. You know, it really displays as well the behaviors that you're emulating, because I'm sure many of you are leading teams that are leading teams. And so it does emulate that behavior throughout. It's really not in our culture, certainly the Australian culture, and I believe the New Zealand culture as well, to really hold people up and to celebrate individual success. So, you know, it's important for us to really break that mold, because this stuff makes a massive difference. It builds confidence in the individual and it increases high performance. So it's well worth doing. And like I said, doesn't have to be monetary. Now, it's important that you do get to know what their drivers are as well. What do I mean by that? So their drivers is what's important to them, what motivates them. Now, if I have a team member who is extremely introverted and I hold them up on a Zoom call in front of 60 people and publicly praise them, it in fact could have the opposite impact. It could demotivate them. So you really need to understand what drives them, what motivates them, how do they need to be recognized. Whereas others, and perhaps again, the more extroverted people, might really look for that public celebration and that public praise. And this is relevant whether it's remote leadership or in-person leadership. So understanding what their drivers are and really getting to know them. There's no point sending them a bottle of red wine if they don't drink. There's no point, you know, sending through flowers when they suffer from hay fever, as an example. So sometimes we have good intentions around gifting, but we just need to make sure that it is aligned with what the individual needs and what we know of the individual. And recognition, as I said, improves performance. It creates high-performing teams where people are, you know, constantly striving forward. They know what their strengths are because you've highlighted them, and they know what their opportunities to develop are, and they're working on those. So it really keeps people pushing through even the tough times. Encouraging innovation. Now, this one is what goes out the window when we start to micromanage. So when we start to micromanage and take on a bit of a command and control leadership style, as an example, it shrinks innovation. People are fearful of putting forward their suggestion. So to create an environment where people feel like you encourage innovation, it's about being open. So even though you might think to yourself, you know what, I don't think that idea is going to work, I just want to shut it down in the moment, actually saying, you know, I'd like to explore that a bit more with you. Can I ask you some questions so I can help to understand it a bit deeper before you go shutting it down? So that being open to it is really important. Supporting those new initiatives and ideas. Now, sometimes when someone comes to us with an idea, as a leader, we go, oh, I either have to shut it down or I have to action this. But the reality is you don't have to action it. It could be that they work with somebody else in the team on it. So sometimes we feel like, you know, innovation, it's a nice to have, Suzy, but do we really need to do it? Absolutely we do. But we as leaders do not need to be the driver of the actual task or the suggestion that's been put forward. We can share that openly with others in the team, perhaps, who can get on board and support and foster that and grow that idea. Encouraging innovation with process improvements. So that constantly kind of seeking feedback and looking for better ways of doing things and actually asking the question can really create, a team that is full of innovation. We've seen it throughout this whole pandemic situation that the organizations that have had strong focus on innovation, that have been able to adapt, I think we were sick of the word agile, but that have been agile enough to change and go, you know what, we're a gin distillery, but now we're making hand sanitizer. Those are the organizations that I've seen really set up for success. Providing opportunities to share successes and safety for potential failures. So for me, when things go wrong, it's actually finding ways that don't work, which leads you towards finding ways that do work. So you really need to expect that there are going to be mistakes, that there are going to be failures, and that there are going to be setbacks. So any of you out there that are entrepreneurs will understand this. We need to be resilient to those failures and learn from them. They're all an opportunity to learn. But of course, sharing those successes is important as well, because that encourages others to get on board with innovation. Making sure that we are devoting attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me, this is the number one thing that I think is going to come out of this pandemic. All of those people that were previously told, yeah, I'm sorry, we don't do flexible work arrangements here, you can't work from home, are hopefully seeing the benefits actually of that, not only on the economic side of things, but also in the amount of different talent that they're able to attract with that philosophy. So I'm really hopeful that that will be one of the things that will come from this pandemic in a positive way, is that we will start to see people and organisations really putting that attention into the diversity and equity inclusion. Even for people that previously were geographically not located near that business, to see that they could be working remote and still be a part of the business and still contribute in a really meaningful way is a great outcome. So there's some great stuff that can come from that, as well as the diversity. So we're talking cultural diversity, diversity of gender, inclusion in terms of people of all abilities being employed in organisations. It's one of the things that I can really see coming out of this that I'm excited about. Now, the final one, this was our number 6, which, as I said, it should have been number 1. This is all about leading yourself. So personal leadership, having strong personal leadership. For you, having structure and planning so that you're working on the right things, creating a routine for yourself. And that routine would include things like time with your people, time perhaps for you to work on strategy, taking time out for yourself in terms of exercise and looking after your physical and mental well-being. It's about having boundaries. And I've worked with leaders where there's no boundaries. In fact, one recently was saying that, you know what, I work pretty well 7 days a week, probably 12-hour days, 7 days a week, because I walk past the dining room table and my laptop's there and I just think, you know what, it's Saturday afternoon. I haven't got much else to do. I'm just going to smash out some emails. I'm sure none of you on the call have done that. But, we've all been, stuck in that little trap where we haven't had boundaries around it. Perhaps for you, it's doing team check-in calls at 6 o'clock at night, or sending a message to your team, or sending an email to your team after hours, and then being surprised that they're responding, because if you're working, they're likely working too. So really having clear boundaries on what your workday looks like, with flexibility, of course, and being disciplined towards those, and being disciplined around your structure and your planning and your routine and what those boundaries are. It's absolutely critical. And it's something that I've seen leaders, unfortunately, almost face burnout during this time because they haven't done those things. The next one is about adjusting your leadership style to the person and the situation. So, really knowing, what does that individual need of me now? Do I need to be perhaps more of a coaching style as opposed to more command and control? Or do they actually need some support from me? So do I need to be a bit more affiliative perhaps? So adjusting your style to the person and the situation is really important. Developing a growth mindset, and I mentioned this earlier, those that know me know that I'm a bit of a growth mindset junkie. So developing a growth mindset is a mindset that takes ownership, that has accountability, and that takes responsibility. It doesn't blame or have excuses or deny things. So it's an above the line, if you like, mindset that is all about constantly learning and growing, even when things don't go well for us. Monitor your resilience level. Now, this has been another critical one that I've seen people, I've seen leaders and talk to leaders that are saying, you know what, I'm getting snappy at the things that previously would not have even bothered me. And it's because the resilience levels are low. Now, that's caused by often lack of sleep, lack of boundaries, lack of routine, poor diet. There's a whole heap of factors that come into play and really impact on not only mental health, but of course your own resilience levels. So making sure that you're aware of that and you're checking in with yourself. If you're feeling like you're starting to go down in your resilience, or you're reacting to things that perhaps you didn't before, that's a bit unusual for you, make sure that you are checking in on that and aware of that, and getting support where needed and making adjustments along the way. All of us, I think, throughout this time over the last 18 months or so have all had ebbs and flows of that, where we've struggled, and times where we're like, you know what, I'm good, I've got this. And for me, what I've seen is that it's when we've got structure, planning, routine, boundaries, and discipline is when we are at our strongest. Remembering that everybody reacts differently to stressful situations. So the human brain is wired for connection. And when we don't have that, and when we're in times of crisis or trauma, and all of us have experienced an element of trauma, regardless of where we've been at throughout this, it really does rewire the brain for protection. And that is generally, that fight or flight mode. So we just need to be mindful that others are reacting differently to situations, and we need to approach it with kindness and with empathy. And I talked about empathy before. So really just understanding what it's like to walk in their shoes and where they're coming from. And then being proactive with your mental health is absolutely critical. I think it's one of the things that we're going to see come from this is, a wave of unfortunate mental health problems. So making sure that you're using your employer's employee assistance program if you have one. If you don't have one, making sure that you are seeking out professional support when needed. I know I'm talking to leaders a lot, and in fact, in recent weeks, I think I've suggested that to clients a dozen times because people are feeling a lot of anxiety, they're feeling a lot of uncertainty with what's happening, and they're feeling a lot of pressure. So making sure that you are looking after your own mental health as a leader and checking in on those around you as well is really critical. So that's it for our top tips. Let me speak now. Top 6 tips for remote leadership. In terms of skills that really you should be learning now, if you haven't already, those communication skills, making sure that you're getting feedback on that communication. Social skills. So if social skills don't come naturally to you, really great skills to be building on. That team building skills, so learning how to bring people together and have them driving for a common vision and for high performance. Building that trustworthiness that I spoke about, being able to adapt your leadership style and really understanding more deeply around the different leadership styles. And of course, those technology skills that are critical for us to really be navigating this time. Sometimes as we're seeing a relaxation of border restrictions and COVID restrictions and other restrictions, we start to think, oh, good, I won't have to do this for much longer. But I feel like this remote working and the remote leadership is here to stay in some form, whatever that hybrid model looks like. we're seeing it around the world for those that have emerged out of these times, that it is here to stay. So don't just think, you know what, I don't need to learn any of that stuff because I'll be back in the office soon. You know, there's a good chance that you won't be, or that a portion of your team won't be. So these are skills that are going to help you moving forward. I just wanted to give a quick plug for a program that we have coming up. We've got a whole range of different programs on our website at the moment. This is a demonstration actually of how we've adjusted. So we previously ran a lot of face-to-face workshops. Over the last 18 months, we've been doing a lot more online. And so we've got a Leadership Boost program, which is really designed to tackle the tough stuff of leadership. So it's a fully online program, runs for 4 months, kicking off at the end of October and running through until February. It includes 8 self-paced learning modules, which is all the tough stuff, like I said. So that leading change, leading with structure and getting some best practices within that, having fierce conversations, you know, those difficult conversations that we go, oh, I really don't want to do that. I'm just going to ignore it for a bit longer. How's that working out for you? Generally not well. So having fierce conversations, and we've got a model around that. Going deeper on this whole remote leadership skills, networking, which is critical. How do we do that in the virtual environment? And communicating with influence. So having a voice at the table when you get the seat at the table, as well as being able to influence those around you. And I mean, taking a seat at the table in a virtual sense, of course, as well. Public speaking. So I think it's known as being one of the things that people fear most. So we're tackling that in that module, as well as really building your self-awareness as a leader. And we use a DISC leadership profiling to do that. It includes 3 executive coaching sessions. And for the first 10 people that sign up, there's no steak knives. But for the first 10 people that sign up, they have me as their executive coach. We have an amazing team of highly qualified, highly skilled coaches that will work with others, and they do that today. So in our business, which is brilliant. So we've got some great diverse coaches, and we'll match the coaches to the individual and what it is that they need. We've got a handbook and of course an alumni community, which is a great way for people right across Australia and New Zealand to stay connected through that community. So for 1 week only, we've got a 10% offer on that. So Boost 10. We're going to close off enrollments in around 3 to 4 weeks time, so 18th of October. And a payment plan is available where you can pay it by installments. Organisations can also do the instalment bit. It really is designed that organisations would invest in their leaders, but individuals can self-fund, and that instalment process we think makes sense for people. So yeah, check that out on our website, suzymiller.com.au. Shameless plug over. What questions do you have, my friends? Now, there's 2 ways we can do this. You can ask them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Now, I can't see you all at the moment, so please, if you are going to unmute yourself and ask a question, if you could say your name beforehand. I'm really willing to take any questions that you have right now. Don't let me off too lightly, or you can do so in the chat. Fee, I thought I might just check in with you now to see if we've had any questions come through the chat.
No, we haven't. You must have so much.
Wow, comprehensive and thorough job done then. Maybe
yes.
not.
Suzy,
Don't let me off that
Penny,
easy.
you know, I'll always got a question for you.
Yes, Penny, all the way from the UK today.
No, actually all the way from Melbourne today.
Oh, Melbourne today, back in the country.
I'm in detention.
Okay.
Yes. So my question is, with I guess the predominance of online meetings and things like that, what are your thoughts around setting boundaries for teams when you actually connect, in terms of videos on, you know, mute, etc.? Because I get involved in a lot of meetings where people don't have their cameras on, and I have to say, personally, it bothers me.
Yeah. And it could signal disengagement as well, couldn't it? Because
absolutely.
Are they there, or are they, you know, ducking off to hang the washing out? None of us have ever done that, of course. No, no one's doing that now, are they? But it is critical that you set the expectations of what is going to work for you and your team. So I think that what we haven't done well is we haven't agreed on some of the ground rules at the beginning with this, because we've just been chucked in and we've all, sunk or swim. So I think that it is a great opportunity to set the parameters around that and being very clear with you as a leader as to what you do expect and what you don't expect. So I think it's about having open dialogue, Penny, with the team around what are our expectations of each other. So when we're on, we are on, if that's what it is. Our cameras are on, we're there, we're present, as much as there might be distractions happening around us. But it is a critical one. And that setting of expectations is just so important right across the board, not just in relation to calls. The other thing is that not everybody does well on video and finds it quite exhausting. And even for me, that's been doing a lot of this, if I've done a full day of being on screen, it takes it out of me. I'm not sure if anybody else has found that. So really balancing up, having a mix of phone. If you don't need to gather a large group together, perhaps just doing things over the phone. I feel like and I get this all the time. I say to people, yeah, sure, I'll give you a call and we'll have a chat. And they go, oh, could we do a Zoom? And it's like, oh, another Zoom. So I just feel like we just need to moderate that. Has that helped, Penny?
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you, Suzy.
Excellent. And I can see another few things have come through the chat. Fee?
Yeah, there's a question from Nicole there. Do you have a favourite tool for virtual team building?
Look, I think it's about understanding what works well for your team, what they're into, what their likes and dislikes are. I think as a leader, we often feel like we have to have all the ideas on this. And it's the same when it comes to even social functions, in normal times, whatever normal is anymore. We feel as leaders, we need to own that and take it on. But actually, I'd like to see you delegate that out and say to the team, what do you want to do? Everyone's going to take a turn of organising something. So I've seen people do trivia. I've seen people do cooking classes. And that's great if that's what everybody's into. But if I'm not a foodie and I don't like to cook and Uber Eats is my meal every night, I don't really want to stand there and cook in front of a video with all of you. So I feel like, Nicole, you could put that out to the team to say, like, what do we want to do? And then delegating it out to different people to take responsibility for it. Even if you don't enjoy their idea, you know that your idea is coming up and you can do something quite fun. Dress ups, all those sorts of things, I think I've seen done really well. Yeah, the awkward bit is the ones that I think we need to watch. And that was why I listed that in the pitfalls, is that I've seen it happen where people are just wanting to be anywhere other than on that call. And it's really not helpful and counterproductive for what you're trying to do, right? Thanks, Nicole. Other questions, Fee?
No, just a couple of, hang on, one's just come through. From Keegan. I have 2 young children at home that are constantly interrupting calls. I'm very conscious that everyone is busy and that this can be frustrating for team members. Any tips on how to handle this? I'm sure it's more an issue to me than my team.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we've all struggled with that. I've been working from home now for 12 years. And I've seen my children that are now 16 and 13 knocking on my door, on my office door as toddlers at 7 a.m. in the morning when I'm on a call to Canada. I feel like I've navigated that before. And now even more so when we're all in the one household where those co-workers are partners or our children. And for me, it was always about having very clear boundaries with my kids as to when I'm on a call, like when I'm on, this is the signal, there's a sign or there's something that I have, on the door, or if you've got the luxury of a door, of course, but if not, that there's an object that I put on the table that says I'm in a call right now and please don't interrupt me. Now, that doesn't mean that my children have never come into my office when I'm on a call to say, is this a teaspoon or a tablespoon? So those things are going to happen. And this is that bit around kindness that I feel like as leaders, we need to be kind to ourselves if those things happen. But we also need to be kind to others when we see those things happen, because they are happening. It's happened to all of us from time to time. But really educating your kids. My kids as toddlers, as I remember seeing my son with a dummy in his mouth, standing at my door, which it was a glass door. And I could see him standing there as a really young child. He got himself out of bed. And there I was on a call with a client, but he knew, because the door was closed, that he couldn't come to me. Now, as a mum, agony, watching my child, knowing that I need to get to them, but I'm in the middle of something here. So just balancing it up. I feel like, that sort of stuff I'm talking about was about 10 years ago for me. Mine are a lot older now and no, but that doesn't mean that I don't have the odd Wi-Fi glitch because somebody's gaming. So, it's a challenge for all of us. I think it's just being kind to yourself, kind to them, because they're learning this. This is new for them as well, for your children as well, and kind to your team members that are in similar situations. Thank you. Great question.
Suzy, can I just add, so when you do have those meetings and your children are being good, giving them some recognition for their good behaviour, because you want them to follow that, not
Absolutely.
just rassing on them when they've interrupted times.
Absolutely. And I heard of one of my connections is a lawyer, and she was in court online in her bedroom, and her children were being cows in the background behind her, and yet they are normally really good, but things happen, right? So we need some forgiveness there, I think, as well. And like Fee said, really positively reinforcing when the behaviour is when it is great. Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like that's a wrap. Well, thank you all for your time today. I said 45 minutes. You've got a couple of minutes of an early mark. Please make sure that you reach out if you need anything, if we can support you in terms of any materials. We do have some free materials on our website. We do have some short learning bites, because now is really the time for leadership. And you don't need to go it alone. So we are here to support you. Lean on those around you. If you've got people in your life that can support you, if you've got mentors and things, lean on them. We do have a tool coming out for you next week, which is really about building that trust. We talked about the trust and that sharing and that building of the relationship. So sometimes as leaders, we're like, I don't want to tell them that I've struggled a little bit throughout this. Being vulnerable is one of the best things that you can do. So we've got some questions which will really help for you to not only ask really meaningful questions of your team members during one-on-ones or in group settings, but also for you to share your stuff as well, which is really important. Amazing. Thank you so much to my team for pulling all of this together. I know we've done it, in difficult circumstances. Thanks, Fee, for joining us today. This recording will come out to you, like I said, this afternoon, as well as a bit more detail on that Leadership Boost program. You can jump on our website and check that out if you like. Stay connected. We've got various channels that you can do that through social media, of course, or through the website, like I said. Take care of yourself, be kind, be flexible, and enjoy your leadership journey. Thank you.